Here's another one of my philosophical lecture shorts, and today we're going to talk about the second half of my lecture on Heidegger's idea about Dasein and explaining who we are. Last time we talked about Dasein as being in the world, which is thrown into a world which is already taken care of. But along with that, we are being with ready-at-hand objects, but also we are with other Dasein, mit Dasein, in which we can concern ourselves or have solicitude for them, like leaping in or leaping ahead. I mentioned there is one other fundamental part or equal primordial part of this Dasein which we are, and that is Heidegger's one of his most famous ideas, the they self, which is always a part of us. Okay, it's not something we can ever get rid of. It is always there, but as we'll see, it is also the thing in which covers over the rest of who we are. As Heidegger says initially, we are always absorbed in the they self. And what is the they self? In the German term is das Mann, which we see das is the neutered, okay, as a neuter form of the term Mann, which is person. So it's kind of like this, not into this kind of indiscriminate person which comes at us, which is always there. The best term is the they, but sometimes called the global man or the no one. And what Heidegger says, we are always part of the they, and so are all the others, but you can't just put us all together as some and that would be the they. The they is this phenomenon which is occurring always within Dasein. And what this does is it provides what he calls our everyday self, or he refers it to the self in its everydayness. It's the way in which we come to understand the world. The they kind of dominate us and tell us this is how it is, and we begin to understand ourselves only through the way or the lens in which the they have provided, which I'm a part of, and all others are a part of as well. Okay, what he says happens is it creates a distantiality, okay, or a distancing. But what is it distancing ourselves from? What he says is that they distances ourselves from ourselves. Okay, it actually is a way it kind of removes who we truly are as Dasein, as being within the world with all these things, as the they being part of it. It absorbs ourselves into the they, which is the distancing from who we truly are. And so Heidegger likes to term it like this: is when we become absorbed in the they self and the way they want us to understand ourselves, it's a flight towards the they, but a flight away from Dasein in itself, what it truly is. So it's in a way this relation that's part of me, I'm kind of absorbed myself into that, and I forget all the other things in which I am, which are already under there, okay? So it's a flight towards the they and away from Dasein. It creates a distantiality from ourselves. And what this does is it creates a way in which we interpret the world. And if we read right here, he does it really well. Right here on page, 119 in the Stambau, and it's 126 and 127 in the original German. It says, this being with one another dissolves one's own Dasein completely in the kind of being of the others, in such a way that the others, as distinguishable and explicit, disappear more and more. In this inconspicuousness and unascertainability, the they unfolds its true dictatorship. We enjoy ourselves and have fun the way they enjoy themselves. We read, see, and judge literature and the art the way they see and judge. But we also withdraw from the great mass the way they withdraw. We find shocking what they find shocking. The they, which is nothing definite, and which all are, though not as some, prescribes the kind of being of everydayness. So what happens is the they is the way in which we understand the world, but it's provided by the others, which I'm part of, but it's not really me. And what it reminds me of is, how people can get stuck on what they see on TV or in the media, repeat it over and over again and believe that's the way the real really is, and they lose themselves with who they are. It happens all the time. One of the kind of big things that goes on in media today, if we use that as an example, is the way in which outraged or shocked. I'm always shocked, that anything that comes on is like, oh, I'm so outraged about this, or I'm shocked about how people over here are doing this, or I can't believe this is going on here, and this total kind of knee-jerk reaction to just explain and go off about something and how awful things are, or that this needs to be apologized for, or how could he say that, all right? This quick way in which many of us still fall into ourselves, and we begin to do it also. So it creates a distancing from who we really are, and we become more and more absorbed in the they, right? Now, this distantiality leads to what he calls an averageness, okay? Now, what he means by averageness, it creates the average way in which we're supposed to be, the medium way, the way the normal person is supposed to act and do and think. This averageness, though, I want to point out, is not an averageness that is, mediocre. It doesn't have to be, it can be. But also this averageness, we could live in a society in which honor and being brave and things being going and being exceptional and going out like a lot of people in the United States say we're supposed to be, and everyone's exceptional or something like this, okay? It could create, that's an average, it's more like a typical way we're supposed to be, an average way which everyone is supposed to, and the normal way is to be exceptional. It's kind of what he's putting. And he continues from where we were before, that they had its own ways to be. The tendency of being with one another we call dissentiality is based on the fact that being with one another as such creates averageness. In an existential character of the they, it is in its being, the they is essentially concerned with averageness. Thus the they maintains itself factually in the averageness of what is proper, what is allowed, and what is not, of what is granted success and what is not. This averageness, which prescribes what can and may be ventured, watches over every exception and thrusts itself to the fore. Every priority is noiselessly squashed. Overnight, everything primordial is flattened down as something long since known. Everything gained by a long struggle becomes something to be manipulated, something, yes, I'll add here, to be researched on or to be used in some way. Okay, back here. Every mystery loses its power. A care of averageness reveals, in turn, an essential tendency of Dasein, which we call the leveling down of all possibilities of being. And so this dissentiality, which creates an averageness in a way we're supposed to be, the normal person, okay, then creates what he calls a leveling down. Okay? And what he means by this is, once this normal way of being, the they takes over, we absorb ourselves in it, it levels down our possibilities of other things and other ways in which we could be. That I possibly could have been this or that, or maybe I could have been a philosopher or an astronaut, or these things, yet they have told me this is how you're supposed to be. For example, you might have parents or somebody says you need to go into business and do that because it makes money and that's what it means to be successful. And then you become to believe that's the only thing you can do, and by getting wrapped up in this, you lose the possibilities of perhaps maybe you would have been a poet or an artist. Or perhaps maybe your parents are very liberal and they say you need to go be an artist or be a poet, and that then absorbs you into that way, and you lose it. Maybe you would have been a successful businessman. Maybe you would enjoy being a businessman. So it's not like I'm saying, this averageness is something of just liberal ideas or conservative ideas, if that's what you're thinking, or if that's even a good term to use here, if it doesn't confuse it. It's the idea that there is a one way in which we're supposed to be, or creates a certain set of possibilities that we can only know ourselves to be, yet we could be much more than that. And it levels down all those other possibilities in which we could be, okay? So it's leveling down. Now, this leads even further. Heidegger claims what eventually happens is we fall prey. Where he entitles this falling prey, and this falling prey leads to our entanglement. Entanglement, all right? So he says, we fall prey to the they. And what does he mean by that? I mean, you think about it, prey is like a little mouse skirting on through the forest or something, and then the snake's in wait, ready, and the prey has no idea. It's like, oh, I'm just here having a good time, then bam, it got you, it has you. If you think of it like a boa constrictor, when it catches the mouse, as the mouse tries to get out of it and tries to work its way around in it, and the boa constrictor tightens tighter and tighter, and the rat or the mouse becomes more entangled. This falling prey, because we don't even realize it's happening. It's happening because we're thrown into a world. It's happening the moment we're in the world. Perhaps our parents are the first they, okay? We fall prey to it without even knowing, and what happens is we become entangled in the ideas of the they, and can only see the world through the eyes of the they. That boa constrictor tightening more and more and more, and the more I try to fight it, the more I fall into it, it seems. Okay, this entanglement. And he has some characteristics and way in which we are entangled. This occurs. He says, how does this happen? So this falling prey and entanglement happens. He says, first of all, the they is tempting. Now, why is it tempting? He says, well, there's a couple of reasons. First of all, he calls it the idle talk or chatter, okay? The they kind of moves in this idle talk in which they seem to be talking about everything, yet nothing is said. Like on TV or in the media, you see those people who seem to go around in circles talking, and it seems like they're talking about everything that's relevant, yet really nothing's been said at all. Or you think about your friends who are gossiping, okay, maybe talking about others or other people, and they're kind of going around in circles, but really nothing is really said. Nothing's really being achieved. There's also this sense in which he thinks Dasein is curious. We are a curious being. In places, Heidegger calls us, we are the being in which being is an issue for us. We wonder about this, all right? So we're also curious to know the answer. And he also explains how the world, the they, is ambiguous, in which they seem to have an answer for everything. A one-size-fits-all. It's like, oh, you want to know about this? We can tell you about that. Or we don't know about this? Well, we have a way of explaining things we don't know. And so it seems like they have an answer for everything. And this tempts us. We're curious about what's being said here, and we think they have an answer, and it seems like they do. So we're tempted into falling into this trap. Okay? And he says right here, if we go a little further, excuse me, I got my book right here, and this is on page 166 in this, 179 in the original. Idle talk and ambiguity, having seen everything and having understood everything, develop the supposition that the disclosedness of Dasein, thus available and prevalent, could guarantee to Dasein the certainty, genuineness, and fullness of all the possibilities of its being. So it seems like the they is going, see, this is the answer, this is the way it's supposed to be, and you're so tempted to go, oh, I want to know the answers, I'm curious, and so you're easily tempted of going, it seems they provide them. Okay, we could see this with the media, we can also see with the church, or perhaps trying to get you on. It could also be the philosophy professor trying to convince you of this. It seems the answers are all there, and I'm kind of absorbed into it, and I go, ooh, that sounds good, I think they're right. And I fall into it, and it feels like I'm actually am living a genuine life, and I am living up to it, but except I'm just accepting what's been provided to me. And he goes further. In this self-certainty and decisiveness of the they, it gets spread abroad increasingly that there is no need of authentic attuned understanding. The supposition of the they that one is leading a sustaining and full and genuine life brings a tranquilization to Dasein, for which everything is in the best order, and for whom all doors are open. Entangled being in the world, tempting itself, is at the same time tranquilizing. So, not only tempted, he says, it tranquilizes us. Tranquilizes. Now, what does it mean to tranquilize? It makes you think of, when you shoot an animal and it falls asleep or something. That's basically what Heidegger is saying, is when we get tempted into thinking that we're living a genuine life, we become tranquilized and we no longer ask the questions of what does my life mean, or where should I go, or is this really what I want to do? Because I'm so convinced that I am leading a genuine life. So in some way I fall asleep. I don't notice that I'm not really leading a full life or a life to my full potential. And so I become tranquilized. I'm asleep to it. I don't even realize it anymore. Okay, this is a major problem, Heidegger thinks. But we go a little further. He then says what happens to us is we begin to become alienated. And who are we alienated from? Well, haven't thought about it. We are alienated from ourselves. The more and more absorbed we come into the they, the more and more alienated we lose the fact that we aren't just the they self, but we are a being in the world, which is thrown into a world taken care of, but we're a being with other ready-at-hand objects, with other beings as well, the Dasein, which we can concern ourselves for, is leaping in, leaping ahead, and there's this the they self that's there. And so we forget that we are all this, in which our possibilities are open to be this, that, or the other thing, in which the world can be taken on this way or that way, and I lose myself totally in here. I become alienated from what I truly am, and I can only understand myself as the they. And so let's continue. This is what he says. This tranquilization and inauthentic being, however, does not seduce one into stagnation and inactivity, but drives one to uninhibited busyness. Being entangled in the world does not somehow come to rest. Tempting tranquilization aggravates entanglement, with special regard to the interpretation of Dasein. The opinion may now arise that understanding the most foreign cultures and synthesizing them with our own may lead to the thorough and first genuine enlightenment of Dasein about itself. Versatile curiosity and restlessness knowing, it all masquerade as a universal understanding of Dasein. But fundamentally, it remains undetermined and unasked what is then really to be understood. Nor has it been understood that understanding itself is a potentiality for being which must become free solely in one's own most Dasein. When Dasein, tranquilized and understanding everything, thus compares itself with everything, it drifts towards an alienation in which its own most potentiality for being in the world is concealed. Entangled being in the world is not only tempting and tranquilization, it is also at the same time alienating. Okay? This is what happens. This they takes us away from what we could be, in which Dasein is this, in which our possibilities are open, and I can become this or that. The they holds me down into only a limited set of possibilities, in which I am tempted into, tranquilized, and eventually alienated from myself. And this aggravates and leads to further and further entanglement. I find myself initially always entangled. Okay? Now, the question is here, is how could we ever come unentangled from the they? How could that possibly happen? Well, that's the authentic question, right? Is how can we be an authentic self? Self. How can I understand myself as this and not fall prey? How can we may say untangle or unentangle myself? There should be a way, correct? That's something we need to look at. So what about, how about untangle? Okay, excuse me, there we go. How could I do this? Or maybe the best is unentangled. All right, how could I do this? And what Heidegger seems to think is there is this fundamental mood in which we can, that sometimes become equated with and sometimes can't. It's always there, but sometimes it comes to the fore and other times not. And he calls that honest. okay? Perhaps our word is anxiety. But I want to put it clearly. This is not a anxiety of psychology or an anxiety you take Xanax for, okay? And maybe today we might need to use a different word because anxiety has become so psychoticized, okay? But for Heidegger, this type of anxiety, which is always there and which sometimes can come to the fore and sometimes can't, and it could happen when I'm driving or just eating dinner one day, or a major event could bring it on. It could happen at any moment, it's always there, okay? It's an anxiety which pushes back everything, and I'm not sure where I am. And I want to point out, this is not just a simple fear, okay? He says anxiety as fear would be, I'm fearing something particular, one thing or another, or these different things together. This existential anxiety is anxiety about which I don't know what it is I'm fearing. And he says this anxiety, when it happens, all the things in which the they and the possibilities which have shown me get pushed off, and I kind of, it's a flight away from the they, and of course a flight towards Dasein as this potential to be this possibility or that possibility or this thing or the other, but I do not know which one it is. It's I would say pushing back in which these things become indifferent, and I no longer know should I be this or that, and nothing seems to work anymore. All the ways of the they no longer work for me and don't make any sense anymore. It doesn't seem to be what's happening. He says, when this occurs, I am pushed back onto myself, this anxiety, which I am fearing the unknown of not knowing what things are and what I should be and what my being is. And when it occurs, the world as a being in the world, which I am, opens myself up. I realize I am in this world which I'm thrown into, and it's taken care of by the others, but which is contextual and relational, which it could be this or that and open to potentiality. And there's these things in which are ready-at-hand objects, and I have these other Dasein there, which I can concern myself in different ways, and there's this they self, which is pushing on me. This opens up to me as I am, and I become anxious. The anxiety, this existential angst, opens this up as what it is. This seems to be, for Heidegger, one of the keys of maybe unentangling ourselves. But there is the problem of what I like, and this is where I want to finish on, what I like to call the Heideggerian trap. Okay, and what I mean by this Heideggerian trap, okay, is the fact that, well, at some point you must take a possibility on, right? Once I push it back, no one ever stays with anxiety. It always comes back, we absorb ourselves back into the world. How do we know which possibility is the authentic one to absorb ourselves in? Or every time I reabsorb, I become inauthentic again. Is this what's happening? It seems that any possibility that's out there is still provided to me by the others, by the they. The world is always taken care of. So the possibilities that lay before me are not mine. Yet I need to accept one of them and choose one of them. And so I'm worried about my choice. Is that, as I absorb myself back into the world, do I then become inauthentic? Or is there something else to it? And the best ways that I've been able to really kind of talk about this possibility of being maybe an original self, of doing something that is wholly me, a possibility that's not the they, seems, I think, wrong-headed. What I think is the best way to think is maybe the whole point of being authentic is to think of it in some way of like the Kierkegaardian defiance, in which you defy yourself, that you can never totally unentangle yourself, but the fact that you're attempting to push it and attempt to unentangle yourself and find yourself, that's what it means to be authentic. Or you can think of it similarly with Camus' rebellion. To be a rebel, I'm rebelling against this and trying to push it away and tear myself and find out who I am. Though despite I may never be able to do it completely, the fact that I am attempting to undertake this and find myself is perhaps what it means to be authentic. And the term I like to use, and this is a Castleberry term, it's one of mine, okay, is perhaps what we're looking for is not an original self, but an aboriginal self. Okay? And the reason I like that term, or starting to use this term, though it could change soon, I like it because it has the fact that if you're an aboriginal, you're a native. You are a native, and that means you are embedded within a society that is there. But this nativeness, this aboriginal self, is a much more primordial, a much more closer at home to who you are, even though I understand that I am a part of something else. And it understands that you can't be ideally original, but among this, I can find myself, even though I know I'm still a part of this native land that I'm in. Okay, this nativeness that is Dasein, which I'm along with these others, and I find a more primordial, original who I am among them. And so maybe this is a better term for it than being original. Maybe we're intending to be aboriginal, to take this. And I think we can connect this idea, as I said, with Kierkegaardian defiance or Camus' rebellion. And that is how I think about this, at least at the end. But as we see, for Heidegger, this angst is an important thing to help us. It's not something to be fearful of. Okay? It seems to be an important part of the human condition, and something that's not bad. Okay, it's not something that we should try to get rid of, but sometimes we should cultivate it in some way. Okay? Well, that's as far as we can go if we keep this a short lecture before we get into an hour-long lecture, right? But if you have any questions, please email me, and I will see you next time on my philosophical lecture shorts. Thank you very much.